Hey there, it's Kimberly Lucht, and I want to take a moment today to honor Mental Health Awareness Month. And maybe you're like me and have somebody in your life who struggles with mental health, or maybe you yourself have had challenges or are currently having a mental health challenge in your life. And either way, I know that both experiences can be very intense, very heavy, and I want to take a moment to respect that and to respect where you're at, wherever that is today, and know that you're not alone. Know that there's a lot of people who have either experienced something similar or witnessed something similar. Whatever you feel like is going on either internally or externally, I just want to honor you and this life that you live for a few moments, and just taking a deep breath with me right now and exhaling, because I know that this topic can bring up a lot. It's something that I think can be so isolating, but really what I want to express today and in this video is how mental health and mental health challenges can actually really help us move forward as a community if we see it that way, and if we see it as an opportunity to get closer to each other. And so there's a lot of things that I've learned from my own experience as a daughter of somebody who has struggled with pretty severe bipolar disorder. There's so much there. There's so much emotion when I think about it, and I know that like a lot of it is biochemical and a lot of it is energetic and a lot of it is emotional, and it's something that as somebody on the outside of a mental health challenge, it's like, okay, well, what can I do to support you? How can I best show up? What are the ways that I can help you and create a safe foundation for you? And a lot of that can't come from, people who are not therapists or not psychiatrists, right? Like we have to kind of stay in our lane with those types of things, but there's certain things that I've noticed myself implementing that have really helped not just me, but also my family member feel a little more grounded and safer in those moments where things can get a little chaotic. And I want to again say that I am not a qualified mental health professional. Like this is definitely just things that I've really noticed that in my own personal experience have really helped me, especially when I feel like, whoa, what is going on? This doesn't feel like it's normal. Is this normal? I'm not quite sure. And so just for context, I grew up with a mother who had and still has pretty severe bipolar disorder, and for the most part she's been really, really stable for my whole life. There's only been a couple instances that I can remember feeling like, whoa, like this is a little wild and not normal, right? Like I think bipolar disorder, the way that it's expressed in my mother is it's basically she becomes out of touch with reality. And so mania is like, wow, I'm like a superwoman, like I can do anything, I can do this, I can do that. And like it just, there's been moments where I'm like, wow, okay, so that's what that means. And the first time that I experienced that was when I was 15. And when I was that age, my mom had like a medication interaction where she always takes her medication for her bipolar disorder, which is such a blessing because I do know people personally, and also have heard of people having friends or family members in their lives that do not. And so I really honor and respect her for, taking the medication that helps her stay in this world and not like, completely detach from reality. But there has been one moment in particular that I'm thinking of. It's like, wow, okay, it interacted with one of these medications that another doctor had prescribed to her. It wasn't her fault, but something clicked with those two medications and things just got really haywire. And I haven't really spoken too much about this because of course it's not my story. It's something that I think is really close to home, and it's something also that I know more people experience than not, right? Either personally or like through somebody else. And if you've ever, been in a, depression or in a manic episode, if you've ever had any sort of other mental health challenges like anxiety or ADHD or anything that you just feel like kind of debilitates your ability to function in society, what I've learned from my mother and what I continue to learn from her is that there's certain things that really make it easier as you go along. And so I want to share some of those things because, first of all, they help me. And secondly, I think for anybody, whether you're struggling with mental health challenges or not, they're really beautiful truths to come back to time and time again. And so the first truth that I want to bring to the table, of course, this is my truth as I see it today. So of course, if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. But truth number one for me is what you resist persists. And so if you feel any sort of inner conflict and inner resistance towards either your own mental health situation or somebody else's, I want you to notice that in the body. Just place a hand anywhere that it's showing up for you and notice if maybe we can let a little more surrender come into that space. Why? Because when you're fighting with reality, a lot of times it tends to kind of get entrenched and get even more hooked into the earth and more hooked into reality. Here's a metaphor to kind of bring that into form a little bit more. If you have a dog, maybe you play tug with them a few times during the day, or maybe you play in some other way. But I used to have a dog named Remy who would play tug, and she was pretty strong, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, she's so strong. And I would pull back as she pulled me. I would pull back, like resisting, right? Her resistance. So resistance against resistance just creates more resistance. But what I noticed when I let go is like her jaw would soften. As I softened my grip, she would soften hers. Like I'd kind of loosen my grip just enough where I wasn't pulling anymore, but I still had the toy in my hand. And then she would soften her jaw, and then I'd be able to get the toy and throw her the toy, which is what she really wanted. But, you know, at that time, it just was such a big metaphor for me of like, wow, like what we resist persists. And so if I kept pulling and she kept pulling, we're just going to keep pulling. But let's say, for example, you have somebody in your family or in your friend group who's struggling right now. If you're like resisting that struggle and resisting their experience, or resisting maybe your own experience of their struggle, it's just going to create more tension than necessary, I think. And of course, this doesn't mean don't go to the doctor. It doesn't mean don't go to the psychiatrist if you need to. It doesn't mean, let them behave however they want to behave. It just means to stop resisting in the spaces that you don't think it's necessary to resist anymore. And so I think intuitively, maybe you know what those are. And maybe it's, instead of feeling bad for feeling bad, why don't we instead feel into those emotions and just look at them with a more neutral lens of like, okay, this is what's happening, and kind of becoming a little more even keeled about how we approach these types of things that are difficult and are challenging, but don't need to be so tense, right? We can loosen the grip a little bit and see it a little more from that bird's eye view or bird's eye perspective. And that really helps the tension loosen. And in my experience, it also really helps that person feel seen, heard, and loved by you. And if it is you struggling at this moment, then same thing. It helps you feel more seen, heard, and loved when you accept certain things that are just your reality in this moment. Again, doing the things that will help you, like if that is taking medication, or if that's doing meditation or exercising, or just taking a beat and listening to videos like this just to remember that you're not alone, then do those things. Of course, it's not surrendering all of your will and all of your actions to the universe. It's just saying, hey, like I'm fighting myself over this situation, and maybe I don't need to fight so hard. Maybe I can just take a deep breath and see what this reality is about, and notice where I can do certain things, but also release control in other ways where I know I can't directly control. Like if you can't directly control your genetic predisposition and stuff like that, there's certain things you can't control, but what you can control is the way that you approach this. Getting out of these cycles can feel like, whoa, what a trudge, what a difficult feat to even just like try to get out and try to fight against the cycle. Maybe you've been through really difficult cycles of anxiety or really difficult cycles of depression, and it feels really weird to be like, okay, don't resist, those cycles, because I know that you probably don't want to go back there and you don't want it to become such a big part of your life. But ultimately, loosening the grip a little bit on resisting that cycle might actually in turn help the cycle be prevented and not persisting. So that's something that I want you to just let settle in the body and see if that resonates for you in some way. And again, if you're a witness to somebody who's struggling with mental health, I think the same is true. Like I think if my mom is struggling with mental health, then I see it as like, okay, she's struggling with mental health. I'm accepting this. How can I show up with love? How can I show up with support? Even when it's difficult for me, and even when I feel like I'm hurt or I'm upset about certain things that might trigger for me, it's always great to go back and think, okay, like if I can accept this fully and completely, how would I choose to react? How would I choose to show up? And a lot of times you show up with a lot more love. And love is such a key factor in maintaining mental health. Again, there's certain cases where that's not enough. And that's not to say don't do the things that are working for you and don't do the things that have served you so far. It's just to add a little layer of love in really might help you bring it back even more to the self and bring it back even more to your true nature, which I believe our true nature is love, regardless of our brain chemistry, regardless of our experiences in life. I think a lot of us are really just trying to return back to that love space. And so again, this resist and persist cycle, maybe if you drop that a little bit, more love can come through. Truth number 2 is to forgive yourself quickly. Why is this important? What I witnessed when I saw my mom's episode when I was about 15, I witnessed her in a state of full and complete calm and acceptance after the fact. And she's like, yep, that happened. I'm so sorry you had to see that. And she was in full awareness of what had gone down and also in total, complete acceptance at that moment that I saw her in, at least, of what happened. And I noticed her forgiving herself fast. And this links in a little bit to the first truth that I shared, which is what you resist persists. Truth number 2, it's almost like less of a truth and more of a tip, I guess, but forgive yourself fast. When you forgive yourself fast, things move a little bit easier and move a little bit more quickly towards regaining your mental health. That's what I saw, at least in her. Because let's say, for example, that she would have been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that or did that. I can't believe this happened again. And she would have been in this like kind of blaming and guilt and shame mode, which I see a lot of people in when mental health issues show up. If that were her case, I don't think she would have bounced back as quickly as she did. And maybe that comes from experience, because I know that before I was conscious of her mental health, she did have more episodes than I was aware about until, later in life. I think it comes back to this element of being able to forgive yourself quickly is such a freedom giver for anybody who struggles with mental health. And I know that when I have moments, whether it's like I'm angry about something or feel a little sad, those moments of forgiving myself, I find so much relief in, because it's so helpful to, again, come back to that space where it's like, it's okay. Like, you messed up. It's not the end of the world. You're still alive. You're still healthy. You still have love surrounding you. And so finding a moment, if you're in this space right now, or maybe you have somebody in your life who really needs to hear this, forgive yourself for whatever has happened. Forgive yourself. You did the best that you could. You did the absolute best that you could. There's nothing that you could have done differently other than forgiving yourself in this moment, right? There's so much, of course, that we can go back in our minds and replay the scene and replay the way it panned out. But ultimately, what happened, and you can't do anything about what happened in the past. And so focusing right now on the forgiveness of the present and the future, and letting yourself know, hey, like, it's okay. It happened. And maybe asking for forgiveness if there were other people involved, right? And just like letting your self-forgiveness come first, right? Truth number 3 is that mental health is a cycle. It's not a linear process. You probably already know this. You probably already understand this. Things move in cyclical patterns. And what I like to tell some of my energy healing clients is that those cycles, sometimes they get a little less frequent over time as you begin to accept and forgive yourself more regularly, as you begin to cultivate more love energy towards your mental health versus this kind of resistance energy. A lot of times what can happen is that the cycles become a little bit wider, and more spacious. It's like, okay, maybe before you had, oh my God, I have a panic attack every day, do. And it's just like cycle. But then maybe it becomes, every month or maybe every year. And the cycle starts to get a little bigger and wider and less frequently coming to this like apex or climax moment where you're like freaking out about whatever it is. And when we look at mental health as a cyclical thing, it becomes a little less about managing like certain points and situations and more just seeing like, oh, okay, this is the cycle of life. Like, let's say, for example, you get a little sadder when there's no sun. That's a cyclical thing, right? Because wintertime, of course, it just so happens that we get less sun. And so you can kind of predict this cycle of mental health for yourself, and that might be a little more predictable than other types of mental health challenges and situations, but ultimately it still comes back to that. Like, for example, my mom, between the time I was 15 and the time that I was 3, I think she went like 12 years without an episode, and that's a long cycle. Like, it lengthened and in time, and it became more spacious for her, and she was able to live a really normal, supposedly, life, with this mental health condition. And that's something that might not be available to you or someone you love in this moment in time, but it's something to kind of look and see, okay, what might make this possible? What might make it more possible for the cycle to get a little longer and wider, and getting this circle from being like every day or like every hour to maybe every month, every year, every 2 years, every 12 years, right? That's my hope, that your mental health feels stable enough for you to see it as kind of this cycle of life, that it's not always going to be the same. And that's part of the beauty, in a way, of having this type of brain and this type of body and this type of connection with the elements, is that we are never going to be the same today as we were yesterday or the day before that or the day after today. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Of course, it can feel really like destabilizing, but ultimately it's something that I think gives a lot of beauty to our lives, is to have these cycles of life. And my hope for you is that those cycles feel spacious enough for you to have a beautiful, fulfilling, normal, quote unquote, life, and to have blessings come through your mental health struggles or the struggles that you see somebody else going through. And so I really, really hope that this helps. And of course, everyone's situation is different. This is just a lens and a peek inside my own experience with mental health struggles in my family. And I really hope that if you yourself are struggling with mental health, or if somebody you know struggles with mental health, that you'll be able to find the resources to just make one decision at a time towards better mental health, whatever that means for you. And again, if you need to reach out to professionals and therapists and psychiatrists and whoever else might be able to support you, I really encourage that. And I've never felt like there's any shame in that game, because I grew up with somebody who had certain needs, mental health needs. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we have those available to us as a society, and also that we're kind of destigmatizing the needs around mental health that a lot of people have. So just to recap some of the truths that I brought up from my own experience in this mental health journey and this lifetime, is that number 1, what you resist persists. Number 2, self-forgiveness comes first. And number 3, mental health is cyclical. It never stays the same every day. And maybe that's part of the beauty of life. So hopefully you feel a little more peace and centeredness in this topic and in this discussion today. And if you have anything that you'd like to share in the comments below, please feel free to drop it in. My hope is that you feel just alive and more seen in this experience. And I also think that sometimes when you have had your own mental health challenges or have seen somebody in their mental health challenges, it makes you an even better light worker. And so if you have a spiritual business, if you're a spiritual entrepreneur and you want to expand that a little bit more, and you feel like this kind of journey through mental health has allowed you to bring certain gifts to the forefront, then I really invite you to check out my Soulful Business Roadmap. It's something that really brings you back home to why you're here and what purpose you're here to serve, what mission you're here to illuminate, and the people that you're here to help. And so if that's something that you want to discover or want to expand upon, go ahead and click the link down below. It shows you essentially how to get started, how to make money as a soulful business owner, and also how to, bring your gifts to the light and bring them out into a world that really desperately needs light workers to come to the forefront, to heal, to expand, to open people up to new possibilities of being, whether that's new possibilities in their physical health, mental health, energetic health, any sort of health related stuff, but also just life in general. If that's you, and if you know that you're being called to be a light worker in some way or have some sort of soulful business, then click the link down below. All you gotta do is pop in your name, your email, and then it's gonna be in your inbox. So thank you so much for watching, and happy Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm sending all my love to you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.